Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to a very warm and very sunny Silverstone. We're on the Grand Prix circuit and we've got our second pit stop race of the weekend coming up for the 2024 GT Cup Championship. Well, it's our second day of action here, which means yesterday we had a sprint race and we had a pit stop race as well. So let's look back at some of the highlights from yesterday's racing. Lights are on the gantry, lights flash their way out and they charge their way up towards Copse Corner for the first time. Are we going to have the Mercedes in the lead or might the Aston Martin sweep around the outside? Well, Andrew Howard is trying to, but I think Ian Logie is just going to keep his nose ahead as they head out of Copse Corner and up towards Maggots and then Beckett's for the first time. And in fact, Andrew Howard has lost out to Steve Burgess, who at the wheel of the Radical RXC has snuck his way through. Steve was going well earlier before the car had a puncture, and that cost him retirement whilst he was running in second position. He really has had some pretty rotten luck so far this year. Porsche's fifth in Group GTC, and then there's a little bit of contact there. Andre Borodin and Seamus Jennings make a bit of contact. So that's bits of bodywork flying off, I think, the left rear corner of the McLaren. Into the pit lane has come Andrew Howard. He's out of the car already. Darren Turner being belted in. In goes the communication system. On go the seat belts. The window netting will need to come across. And then, not that Andrew Howard is a slow driver. He is a double former champion in British GT. But Darren Turner has been a professional racing driver for many a year. He's done less racing this year, but he did say he's probably done more work in terms of other developments with Aston Martin than he's ever done before. And also Steve Burgess is in at the wheel of the car that we haven't seen a great deal of, but has been running beautifully well, the Radical RXC in second place. And for Steve Burgess, this is hopefully an opportunity maybe to see if he can mount a challenge in the second half of the race. Now, he's going to have to stop for 5 seconds longer than the car that was leading the race overall, that Team ABBA Racing Mercedes. 75 seconds as Ian Logie gives way to Richard Neary. 80 seconds for Steve Burgess, but he should gain time over the Beech Dean Aston Martin of Darren Turner giving way to Andrew Howard. They were there in third place, weren't they? But they're going to have to stop for an extra 25 seconds compared to Steve Burgess, so gives him a buffer in theory. Out of the number 10 car jumps Sam Nessa. Into the number 10 car goes Will Orton. Out of the number 9 comes Matthew Higgins. In goes Mikey Porter. And then in the background of the shot, Rupert Williams will be out of the Jolt Racing McLaren 570S GT4. And in will jump John Ingram. Oh, problems by the look of things, and that's a rear wing failure for Fraser Fenwick. So that car is surely going to have to come into the pit lane. A, that's a danger because the rear wing has snapped, and the faster he goes, the more load will be placed upon it. But also, it is going to be very ill handling, isn't it, for Fraser Fenwick? And that's the car that leads Group GTC at the moment. That would put the sister car of Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings into the lead of Group GTC. Beech Dean have returned to the GT Cup Championship. And once the transponder data has been looked into, we'll wait and see. They claim the checkered flag. Hopefully, that will also mean they claim the win as well. So brilliant stuff from Andrew Howard and Darren Turner. Steve Burgess at the wheel of the Tim Gray Motorsport Radical, just coming up towards Luffield as well on the final lap. And problems for him with that puncture in race number 1. And he is accumulating more championship points again now in race number 2. Hopefully he'll have a trouble-free day tomorrow here with the pit stop race in the morning and the further sprint race to come in the afternoon. Group GTA is won again once more by Rupert Williams and John Ingram. Their car has just come over the start-finish line now, so Jolt Racing with another win in Group GTA. And then to complete the podium, Richard Neary and Ian Logie's Team ABBA Mercedes. Say transponder stopped working on the car for a period of time, and I think that is probably going to be looked into as to did they lose a lap or did they not lose a lap all of that time in the pit lane. They will come through on the road. The unofficial results in third position, 62 seconds off the race leader, 33 seconds adrift of the next car just up the road. So there we go, that's the action from yesterday's pit stop race. Now, you'll have heard me alluding to in commentary there that there was a transponder issue with the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes. I picked up on that mid-race that I couldn't understand how in the pit stop they'd lost so much time. And it would appear that there was a transponder glitch with that car just as they came into the pits. So whilst they came over the start-finish line in third, they did actually win the race. The results were issued once that data had been looked into, so it wasn't a win for the Beechstein Aston Martin. It was another win for ABBA Racing. Richard Neary and Ian Loggy and Andrew Howard and Darren Turner would have finished second, and Steve Burgess therefore dropped down into third place. So that was all looked into. It's so unusual that a transponder glitch happens, and when it does, it's usually addressed during the race, but in this occasion it happened just as the car came into the pit stop, so that was why it took longer to understand and unravel the data, and that happened very shortly after the checkered flag had been shown. So it's lovely warm conditions here at Silverstone. Some of the spectators clearly keeping an eye on what's going on in the Olympics as well, by the look of things as well. But the cars are making their way out from the pit garages onto the grid. Now, this morning we had a separate qualifying session. That qualifying session gives us the grid for this race here, which is the pit stop race, a 50-minute race with a mandatory pit stop window for the cars in there. And that pit stop window is staggered if you've not joined GT Cup before. And even if you were with us yesterday, it changes for today because it's the Sunday race. Cars that run in Group GTH and Group GTA are the first to pit today. They were the second group to pit yesterday. They're the first group to pit today, and they pit between the 24th and the 29th minute of the race. And if the car runs in Group GTO, Group GT3 and Group GTC, which are largely going to be the cars that are at the front because they've got the most power or the better aero, they pit second today. They'll pit between the 29th and the 35th minute of the race. It's also worth reminding that if it's a pro driver or a pro sporting driver, they cannot start this race today. They have to go in second in the race. It's beautifully warm, 23 degrees here. There is a light breeze. There's a bit of cloud cover, but it's very humid. And certainly for the drivers, it is going to be warm in there. It's going to be a shift that they are putting in this one. So the cars are already making their way out now onto the grid. They'll then have a separate formation lap thereafter, and we'll guide you through the grid on that formation lap and also tell you who the starting drivers are and the period of times that all of the cars have to remain stationary in the pit lane. And that varies from car to car in reality, because the way that it works is that if you are a sporting combination, you have a minimum period of time to spend in the pit lane, which would be 60 seconds. If you are a sporting driver who is paired up with a pro sporting, so you can argue that's a silver graded driver or a semi-pro, then it's 80 seconds you spend in the pit lane. But if you are a sporting driver that is partnered up with a true professional, like the car that starts from pole position, Andrew Howard is the amateur driver. He runs a very busy and successful business during the week, but employs Darren Turner, factory Aston Martin driver, for this weekend to join him. They stop for a minimum period of 85 seconds, but then you have to add to that any success seconds they picked up as a result of yesterday's pit stop race, which means that if you won your group, you pick up an extra 20. If you were second in your group, you pick up an extra 15. If you're third in your group, you pick up an extra 10. And if you're venturing out for your first pit stop race of the season, which one car is, you pick up an average of the group, which in the case of the car that starts at the back will be an extra 7 seconds. So nice to see Richard Chamberlain is out. You just see the orange Porsche 935 slotting itself into place. He had problems yesterday and wasn't able to start either race, but went well in qualifying this morning, and hopefully will have a trouble-free run in what is always a crowd-pleasing car, the flame-spitting orange Porsche 935 clone. And at the back of the grid, just coming into position now, is the black and the Dayglow car, which wasn't featuring in the pit stop race yesterday. Jazz Sapra was only focused on the sprint races, but today we will see that car out in the pit stop race. Jazz Sapra will start. Kevin Clark will take over that car, and he'll tell you a little bit more about how the dynamics work with that car, because it's not quite as straightforward as you would expect in reality, because Kevin Clark is also starting this race in another car, doing a few laps and then parking it, but I'll tell you why when we go through the grid. The grid is fully formed. You can see the heat haze, the team members and VIPs now being allowed onto the grid. This is the car that leads the championship, so Tom Rawlings and Charlotte Gilbert have done so well so far this season. They took a win in Group GTC in the 2 races yesterday. So they finished 3rd overall in the first race and were 5th overall in the second race, the pit stop race, but did win Group GTC on both occasions. And it's going to be a very short stop on the grid for the teams and the mechanics, because they're about to be asked to vacate it. There's Paul Bailey, the reigning champion. Doesn't have the number 1 on the car. Switched to the 28 yesterday because it had so much poor luck since he put the number 1 on the side of what should have been a Brabham BT62 for this weekend. But that car had an engine failure, not its first, sadly, of the season. In testing on Friday, David Brabham was behind the wheel. I think David was saying it's the first time he'd been behind the wheel when the engine failed, but it was a significant failure. Dropped a valve. The valve didn't stay in the head. It went down into the block, it got mangled up with the pistons, and it damaged the crank as well, so it was pretty done for, that engine. But hopefully we'll see the Brabham BT62 back out, maybe if not at Snetterton. Hopefully the final round we'll see it out. It might not make Donington, it hopefully we'll be back at Snetterton, or if not, fingers crossed, we'll see it out in 2025. So a 50-minute race, that staggered pit window. So the cars in Group GTH for the GT4 homologated cars, and the single car in Group GTA, the Jolt Racing McLaren, will pit first during the 24th and the 29th minute of the race, and all of those cars occupy the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of the grid, will all pit between the 29th and the 35th minute of the race, subject to what they want to do. So grid is cleared. Safety car is ready, safety car pulls away, and the cars are about to turn their way out onto circuit in advance of what will be round 17 of the GT Cup Championship for 2024. Round 18 coming up later on, and then we'll have 4 further races at Donington and at Snetterton as well. So the cars on their formation lap, we should be able to guide you through the grid. We'll tell you the starting drivers, and we'll tell you the period of time that everybody has to remain stationary. So pole position, it is Richard Neary, 80 seconds in the pit lane for the Team Abba Mercedes, and alongside is Beechstein's Andrew Howard, 105 seconds for the Aston Martin. Row 2 of the grid, Steve Burgess, 75 seconds, and alongside is Richard Chamberlain's Porsche, 60 seconds for him. Row 3 of the grid had a great qualifying. Andre Borodin, 95 seconds in the pit lane, and alongside is 33 Seamus Jennings, 75 for the Porsche. Charlotte Gilbert is next up, 100 seconds in the pit lane. Fraser Fenwick starts in the sister car, the number 3 car, 75 seconds in the pit lane. And row 5 of the grid, Paul Bailey, that car will have 95 seconds in the pit lane. Alongside is Kevin Clark in the number 62 Lamborghini. Because this race and the lap time you sets the grid for the sprint race, which is what Kevin's focused on, he's going to do 3 laps in the Lamborghini and then retire it. He just needs to set a lap time. So he lines up on row number 5. Row 6 of the grid is James Cayley, 70 seconds. And for company, he's got Chris Murphy, who is off 60. And row 7 of the grid, the first of the Group GTH cars, Sam Nesser in the number 10 Forseti Aston Martin, 100 seconds. The sister car in the hands of Matthew Higgins is on 95. Row 8 of the grid, Doc Bush, 60 seconds. And for the SVG Motorsport Ginetta and Leona Theobald, who starts, it's going to be 90 seconds. The penultimate row of the grid, Paddock Motorsport and their McLaren Artura, Michael Arant, 80 seconds. And alongside is Rupert Williams, who is on 100. And at the back of the grid, it shows just a single driver, number 40, Jazz Sapra. Well, he's going to start the race. But remember, you were saying that Kevin Clark's going to do 3 laps and park up the Lamborghini. Well, he will, but then he'll wait for the pit stop window to open. He'll wait for Jazz Sapra to come in, and he'll take over that number 40 car for part 2 of the race. So that's the way that they all line up. That's the extra dynamic we need to weave in with Kevin Clark, in theory, driving 2 cars in this race. A Lamborghini for the first 3 laps, and then waiting before the BMW number 40 comes in of Jazz Sapra, who makes his debut in GT Cup this weekend, Jazz. So it's good to see him out. Good to see another car out from Woodrow Motorsport. Shame we didn't have Nathan Wells. Nathan Wells, if you're watching social media for GT Cup, was announced as joining us for this weekend, but he blew the engine up on Wednesday. Couldn't get it fixed for this weekend, but he will be back out for Donington Park, Nathan has assured us, so we will get to see his glorious IMSA-esque BMW. And it's nice to see the 1 Series joining us as well. Something a bit different. That's a car that was owned by Matty Evans. It is now part of the Intersport collection of cars, which are all owned by various drivers, but it's nice to see another different car out joining us in GT Cup for the first time, as it is also nice to see James and Bill Cayley out in the Team Trofeo Porsche joining us for the first time ever as well. So they've got themselves into neat 2x2 order. Double wins this weekend for Team ABBA. Could they sweep all 4 races as they did at Snetterton in the 3rd weekend of racing? Well, we'll find out what unfolds over the course of the next 50 minutes, because we are ready to go with round 17 of the 2024 GT Cup Championship. The ABBA Mercedes on pole position. Andrew Howard in the Beechstein Aston Martin sitting alongside. Watch out for Steve Burgess in the Radical. He had a good start yesterday, but fingers crossed, all is well with Richard Chamberlain's orange Porsche. Lights go out, and as they head towards Copse Corner for the first time, it is going to be Richard Neary that leads the way. Richard Chamberlain through into 2nd, and Steve Burgess is there in 3rd, with Andrew Howard dropping down into 4th in the early stages. One of the Forseti cars ran wide there, which I think might have been The car of Matthew Higgins that just ran wide, the black car with the green flashes, but already Richard Neary looking to try and sprint away, and Andrew Howard's trying to get back up the inside of Richard Chamberlain, who was briefly up to second. He's no longer third, he's down to fourth again already, so it's Steve Burgess who's now up into second place. Andrew Howard is there in third, but in a straight line, does the Group GTO Porsche have more grunt than the GT3 Aston Martin? Well, Richard Chamberlain is trying, but can't quite make it stick. Here's Kevin Clark getting swamped by the GTH cars. Remember, his Lamborghini is only going to do 3 laps before he heads in towards the pit lane, we were told. So he may well just drop down to the back of the field and then get some clear tarmac to accelerate into. He doesn't want to be involved trying to get a quick lap time in this race if he's in traffic. Get to the back, get some space, get the quick lap time in, because that will set the grid for the second race. Then park the Lamborghini up and wait for the number 40 BMW to come in, which he'll take over. But no, for the moment, Kevin Clark's fighting it out. Forsetti Aston Martin ahead of him. That's going to be the car of Sam Nesser. Forsetti Aston Martin behind him. And then the Ginetta actually might have gained a place there. Yeah, Leona Theobald I thought was going to gain a place, but couldn't quite. Then the door opened, and I think Michael Arant in the McLaren Artura might be through. Yes, he is. So the number 11 Paddock Motorsport McLaren takes a place away from Leona Theobald, as she was looking to take a place away from the Aston Martin ahead of her. So Kev Clark still mingling amongst the GTHs at the moment. Takes a couple of laps to get the tyres into the ideal operating window. Good tyre, the Pirelli, but you know, there's only so much that tyre blankets can do in a formation lap. It's racing conditions that really build the critical temperature to get the tyre working in its optimum window. And Kevin Clark was just a little bit wiggly there. So through they come. There is the SVG Motorsport Ginetta that runs in Group GTH in the hands of Leona Theobald. There's a very slight amount of damage to the front right bumper also on the car of Matthew Higgins, the Forsetti Aston Martin. You could just see that the bumper was slightly misaligned with the front wing on that car, so there might have been a light touch in the early stages. But through they go over the start-finish line, and now Kev Clark moves out of the way. So, or does he? Yeah, blends out the throttle, lets the cars go through, and doesn't want to get involved in the skirmish in Group GTH. And maybe down the straight he'll just back off the throttle a little bit as well at the wheel of the Lamborghini. Attack, and this is Charlotte Gilbert trying to get up the inside of Richard Chamberlain. That's for 6th position now. Richard Chamberlain's lost a further couple of places since we last picked up on it. Fraser Fennick has gone through, and Andre Borodin has gone through at the wheel of the Greystone GT McLaren. Charlotte Gilbert couldn't quite finish the job though, and there's the spin, and that's Andre Borodin that's had the spin. By the look of that, on the throttle too early coming out of club. Rotates the McLaren 720S GT3, gets it pointing in the right direction, and then we'll look to try and charge his way through the order. So Andre Borodin had contact at the first corner in the first race of the weekend. Was going well in the second race of the weekend, then had light contact with the Porsche, but still managed to finish the race. And I was really impressed with him in qualifying this morning, Andre Borodin, under the tutorage of Ed Peed. And Kev Clark, I thought, was going to park the car in the pit lane at the end of the lap, but I'm afraid he is parking the car in the middle of the circuit, just on the exit of Club Corner, with some sort of mechanical failure. So what has happened to that? Because it's just ground to a halt, is right on the exit of Club, just near the wing, and that is not in an easy place for the marshals to try and get it out of the way under racing conditions. So the race continues at the moment, with that covered by localised yellow flags. Richard Chamberlain still 5th, still with Charlotte Gilbert not that far away. Richard Chamberlain's Porsche has the advantage in the straight line because it's a car that runs in Group GTO, so lots of grunt, but not as, of course, new, and doesn't have all of the tricks. Bit of an analogue car, really. Brilliant work by the marshals, superb stuff. There is a gap there. They can get Kevin Clark's car out of the way. So now, how's that going to work now for the pit stop? Can Kev Clark get back from where he is, which is part the way around the circuit, and get into the pit lane ready to take over the number 40 BMW? Or might now Jazz Sapra have to do the whole race in the car? We'll wait and see. So Richard Chamberlain, as we say, still 5th. Charlotte Gilbert still 6th. Seamus Jennings still 7th at the wheel of the G-Cat Racing Porsche. So the two cats chasing each other around. The top cats, Lamborghini, the G-Cat, Porsche. out of club, past what I assume will still be localised yellow flags, just while we make sure all of the marshals are totally out of harm's way. Kev Clark's car not visible on the camera that we could see there, so I think he's probably behind the barriers, which means that the yellow flags can be withdrawn. And that's also saved us having to go to a safety car or anything such like. And we've got another one stopped, and that's Doc Bush. Right, OK, what's happened to Doc Bush? It looks as though he might have had a spin to end up there. Can't quite tell where that is. It might be up at Stowe, possibly. But he's got the car pointing in the right direction. He is going to continue. And it was at Stowe. Yeah, so Stowe corner where Doc Bush had the spin. Difficult to tell from the camera angle until it panned round, but it looked like Stowe, and yeah, that was confirmed. Down the Wellington Straight, Paul Bailey under pressure for Andre Borodin. All of the time whilst leading the way is Richard Neary, who has set the fastest lap of the race. 2 minutes 0.342, so for the moment, that gives the ABBA Mercedes pole position for the sprint race later on, of course, because it's lap times you set in this, your fastest lap, that will give us the grid for the race later on today. So Richard Chamberlain starting to get away a little bit now in 5th place. That's because Charlotte Gilbert's attentions are now turned to trying to keep Seamus Jennings behind. Now, it's 3 cars in 3 separate groups. It's Group GTO for Richard Chamberlain. It's Group GTC for Charlotte Gilbert. It's Group GT3 for Seamus Jennings. So they're all in separate groups. So even if they shuffle their position, it doesn't alter the amount of championship points they would get. Charlotte Gilbert 6th at the moment. 2nd in Group GTC. The sister car in the hands of Fraser Fenwick leads Group GTC at the moment. Here's Paul Bailey. He runs in Group GTO at the wheel of his Lamborghini. And there's a spin in the background, and that's Andre Borodin, who's had his 2nd spin. Rear wheels just about go into the gravel, but only one of them, so he should be able to get going from there. Wait for a gap in the traffic. Try not to stall the car. And engine fires up. Make sure you grab a forward gear rather than a neutral. And there we go. He will get the car out of harm's way, but that's the 2nd spin. And that's going to undo some of the hard work he'd done to get his way back through the order again. He'd worked his way back up to, what was it, 9th position. But he's going to drop all the way back down through the order once more. Through the loop comes Charlotte Gilbert, runs a little bit wide, which might just hamper her exit speed heading onto the Wellington Straight. Seamus Jennings runs a little bit wide beyond the curbs coming onto the Wellington Straight to try and maintain as much momentum as he can in the Porsche. He's still not going to have enough momentum, is he, to get up the inside going into Brooklands? Yes, he does. Charlotte Gilbert gives him room. Doesn't want to squabble with another car, which is not in her group. So lets the Group GT3 Porsche go through. Group GTC Lamborghini loses an overall place, but still remains 2nd in its group at this stage. And in reality, she was always going to lose time to that Porsche in the second part of the race, because the Porsche is going to stop for 25 seconds shorter than the Lamborghini. 75 seconds when Seamus Jennings gives way to Greg Caton. 100 seconds in the pit lane area when Charlotte jumps out of the car and Tom Rawlings takes over. Tom is one of those drivers that can't take part in the first part of the race today because he is a pro sporting driver. Pro sporting drivers can only start the pit stop race on the Saturday, not on the Sunday. So 40 minutes to go. We've had the first 10 minutes of the race. All of that squabbling between Porsche and Lamborghini as it is now does mean that the orange Porsche 935 of CTR Developments and Richard Chamberlain has disappeared ever more up the road. In Group GTH, Michael Orant is still feeling the pinch a little bit. Leona Theobald driving the wheels off her SVG Motorsport Ginetta. Now these two cars are fighting for the final podium spot in Group GTH, 3rd and 4th in Group GTH at the moment, because the cars that are 1st and 2nd in the group are the Forseti Aston Martins, Sam Nessa and Matthew Higgins, who are a little bit further up the road. They're about 7-8 seconds up the road from this pair. So up towards Stowe they go. Now the Aston Martins might be 7 or 8 seconds up the road from this pair, but of course they're potentially going to have to stop longer for the car that leads Group GTH, Sam Nessa, when he gives way to Will Orton, 100 seconds in the pit lane. When Matthew Higgins gives way to Mikey Porter, 95 seconds in the pit lane. Whereas these two cars we're looking at now, it's only 80 seconds for Michael Orant in the McLaren and 90 for Leona Theobald. So as long as they can stay in touch of those Aston Martins, it should come back to them. The battle for seconds building, isn't it, as well? Steve Burgess in the Radical, second overall in the race, under pressure from the Group GT3 leading car in the hands of Andrew Howard. Had a very quick chat to him over the course of the lunch break. Delighted to be back in GT Cup, thoroughly enjoying it. The third ever outing for Beechstein in GT Cup, and previous outings have been in GT4 cars when Andrew Howard's been partnered up with Paul Hollywood. And for the moment, flash of the lights, tries to put Steve Burgess under pressure, but in a straight line, a car that complies with GT3 with all of the air restrictors and that will have placed upon it, compared to a car in Group GTO. It's going to run out of puff in a straight line. But in the corners, he should have the advantage, and he goes straight up the inside of Steve Burgess. That was close between the pair of them. There was a lot of daylight, wasn't there, between the Aston Martin and the Radical. But decisively through goes Andrew Howard. And on the basis that there are no scuff marks down the side of the Radical, I think that's probably about as close you can get before there was contact. It was certainly a move that Andrew Howard was absolutely committed to. And Steve Burgess thought about it and then thought, no, discretion the better part of valour. Long way to go in this race. He's had rotten luck this season. Let's just make sure he hangs on to what is still second in Group GTO, albeit now third overall in the race. So the great soundtrack of the Aston Martin Vantage GT3. Slightly different rumble coming from the Radical RXC. Down the Wellington Straight they'll go. And once they've gone in towards Brooklands, you can see right in the background of the shot is the next of the cars. And into the pit lane is Jazz Sapra. Now, this is way before the pit window, so that is an issue for the car. And Jazz brings it straight into the garage and parks it up, I'm afraid. So hopefully that is a problem that they can sort and get that car back out for the sprint race, which is what Jazz's focus was anyway this weekend. He was not coming here expecting to do pit stop races, but they changed their mind and they were hoping that they could just do this race. But yeah, shake of the head from Jazz, who I've got to say 2024 has been a rotten season for him. He's got a few BMWs he races, E36s, E46s, but he's just not really had a break this year. He's had luck. It's all been bad, unfortunately. Still the fight for the final podium spot in Group GTH rages on. Leona Theobald not as yet able to try and find her way through and past Michael Orant. So we'll see as to whether there's another opportunity going to present itself. Could it be along the Wellington Straight? There's another big squeal of tyres, which suggests that not all has gone well for somebody up at Brooklands. And that could well be Andre Borodin that's had another spin, because he was just ahead of them. Yep, there is Andre Borodin. So news has just reached me that Jazz has only done laps to qualify for the sprint race. That was not the news that I was told earlier on. I was told that Kev Clark would be joining him for this race. But maybe they have undone that as a result of Kev's retirement out there on circuit. So another spin for Andre Borodin. So is there a small problem with the McLaren? Because, you know, one spin, okay, two spins, yeah, that's unusual. Three, you know, Andre Borodin is an experienced driver, but three spins is even out of character for Andre Borodin. So do make me wonder if there's maybe a small issue with the car that's just affecting his performance in this one. So down the Hanger Straight, Leona Theobald, her best opportunity is yet to squeeze her way through and past the Paddock Motorsport McLaren Artura. She's alongside, she's on the outside line, however, at Stowe, but if she could brave it out around the outside at Stowe, she'd have the inside as they come into the Vale, and the inside when they get towards Club Corner, and that's what she's looking to do here. You can see the nose dip as she gets on the brake at the wheels of Ginetta. Through she goes, up a place, up to third in Group GTH. So that's now the SVG Motorsport Ginetta ahead of the Paddock Motorsport McLaren Artura. Leona Theobald will hand the car over to another driver who makes his debut in GT Cup this weekend, Owen Hizzy, for part two of the race, whereas Michael Orant will hand it over to Tom Holland, who has probably got more experience driving the Ginetta that's just overtaken the car he's going to take over, the McLaren Artura. Very late on the brakes was Michael Orant. There was enough of a gap in towards Village. Is he going to concentrate on the exit of the loop would be his best bet to see whether he could try something down the Wellington Straight. He'll sit firmly in the slipstream of the Ginetta. Remember, they are fighting over the final podium spot in Group GTH, which is for the GT4 homologated cars. So in other words, cars you might see either out in GT4 in British GT or the European GT4 Championship. The cars we have in GT Cup complying absolutely with those regulations. Now back marker traffic, and it's a slowing Chris Murphy that gets straight in front of Richard Neary. And yeah, I'm going to say that's unusual for Chris not to be aware of what's going on around him, but I think he's got a car problem and he just couldn't get out of the way in time. So I think we might see his BMW head towards the pit lane at the end of this lap. And for Richard Neary, thankfully, the slowing BMW, who was just able to understand what was going on in time. So this is going to be 8 laps completed for Richard Neary. He's still got a while to go before we'll see any pit windows open. The first of the pit window only opens, if you're looking at the countdown clock at the top, when there are 26 minutes to go. And that will be when the cars from Group GTH and Group GTA can come in, between 26 to go and 21 to go. For the likes of Richard Neary, the earliest he can come in is when the countdown clock at the top says there are 21 minutes to go. So it's still 12 minutes of pushing out there as hard as he can, 12 and a half of pushing. Well, he's built a good margin, has Richard Neary, 15.2 seconds. Considering he was feeling a little bit under the weather with a bad back at the beginning of the weekend, he's not shown it in his pace. And yet, as expected, at the end of the lap, just by telling the body language of the car, Chris Murphy is destined for the pit lane. So that's the second car that's now parked up beside the Woodrow Motorsport garage. Difficult day so far for them. Hopefully they'll do better in the sprint race. Right, good squabble going on. This is Paul Bailey in 8th place, under pressure from debutant in the series, James Cayley, who sneaks his way through. So the Group GTC Porsche goes through and ahead of the Group GTO Lamborghini. So up to 8th for Cayley, down to 9th for Paul Bailey. Chris Murphy out of the car, and as a former champion, the 2018 GT Cup champion, that's his retirement for him. He secured that 2018 championship in an Aston Martin, hence why it said Aston Martin on the back of those overalls. So James Cayley through. Had a solid weekend himself and his son Bill Cayley in the Team Trofeo Porsche, being run by Graham Heels, I think, is the team owner. Former Alfa Romeo racer himself for a good number of years, and then took over, I think, almost running the Alfa Championship after the sad passing of Michael Lindsay. But they really have had a brilliant debut weekend in GT Cup. Fingers crossed we'll see a full campaign for them in 2025. The car looks brilliant as well in its livery. Very reminiscent of the works and factory Porsche livery from the 1980s. And really looks superbly well prepared. So they gain a place. Where are they in group at the moment? They are 3rd in the group at the moment. They are 30 seconds behind Charlotte Gilbert, so they're going to do well to overcome that in the pit stops, albeit, amazingly, Charlotte Gilbert, when she gives way to Tom Rawlings, will stop for exactly 30 seconds longer than when James Cayley gives way to Bill Cayley. So keep pushing on, Team Trofeo Porsche. You're 32 seconds adrift of the Lamborghini. When the pit window opens, if that gap is similar, you just never know. You could come out ahead of it. So about just under 5 minutes away from the first of the pit windows opening. Now, the first of the cars in the race that could pit under that first window that opens is down in 10th place at the moment. So the top 9 cars, as we're currently running, when we get the first pit window open, they won't be eligible to pit because they all run in Group GTO, Group GT3, Group GTC. Best of the battles at the moment is that battle that we're seeing between James Cayley and Paul Bailey, but they'll start to pull away again now that they've overtaken. Keeping an eye on what's going on with the Forsetti Motorsport Aston Martins as well, because Sam Nesser is only 3.2 seconds ahead of Matthew Higgins, but Matthew Higgins last time through did lap a 1/10 of a second slower, so I think the gap is coming out between those two. So there goes the number 10 car of Sam Nesser, partnered up with Will Orton for this weekend. Will's got plenty of racing experience, either in one-make categories or in GT cars. So through Copse Corner, through the heat haze, down towards Maggots and Beckett's, which even in a GT4 car, this change of direction through this section of the circuit must be unbelievable. So left at Maggots, right at Beckett's, then left at the second part of Beckett's, then back to right for the final part of Beckett's, then you're left at Chapel, all with the car continually changing direction. And then on to the big long hanger straight. And still leading Group GT4 is the number 10 Forsetti car. Now, the sister car that is behind it in the hands of Matthew Higgins is 3.7 seconds adrift, but it will stop for only 5 seconds shorter than the car ahead of it. So we could see a switch around of these two Forsetti cars in the pits. So it's 100 seconds stationary in the pits for the number 10 car. It's 95 for the number 9. So you know what's going to happen, don't you? Sam Nesser's been told to push, 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 get the gap up. And Matthew Higgins is being told to push, 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 get the gap down. In between the pair of them is now the recovering Andre Borodin after his 3rd spin of the race so far. We've still got James Cayley now in the Porsche ahead of Paul Bailey, but I thought he'd pull away having overtaken the Lamborghini. But Paul Bailey is doing well here, sticking with the task. I think he saw the Porsche closing in the mirrors, and Paul is a canny guy. He'll have known that that Porsche is not going to take a single championship point away from him, so let him go through, don't risk any contact, sit on his coattails and push him for the rest of the race. And come the pit stops, it's going to go the way of the Cayley car anyway, because that's 2 sporting drivers together. They'll only stop for 70 seconds, whereas Paul Bailey, he'll give way, of course, to the pro driver that shares his car, which is David Brabham. They'll have 95 seconds in the pit lane. The progress of Andre Borodin continues. Been a bit of a yo-yo race for him, really, hasn't it? He's gained places, had a spin, gained places, had a spin, gained places, had a spin, and now he's gaining places again. Hopefully there's no spin round the corner. No, not through Copse at least. So it's another place gained. Andre Borodin now moves up to 10th overall, 3rd in Group GT3. And the next of the targets will be Paul Bailey's Lamborghini that is 4.3 seconds up the road. That's the black car with the Dayglow yellow flashes to it in the hands of the reigning champion. Secured the championship last year in GT Cup with Ross Wiley. And it wasn't just the overall championship that Paul Bailey secured. He also secured the Sprint Championship and the Sporting Championship as well, I think. I think he took all 3. So there's Andre Borodin. And just ahead of him going in towards Club now, there's the Porsche, there's the Lamborghini. So this is 8th, 9th and 10th getting themselves together here. And Andre Borodin's pushing hard, actually. Just to give you an idea, the first sector of this lap, just the first third of the lap, he was 2.5 seconds quicker than Paul Bailey. Does make me wonder, is Paul Bailey nursing a small issue? We've also now got our front runners in Group GTH, who will be destined for the pit lane, possibly, before too much longer. About to be overtaken by our overall race leader, which is Richard Neary. Because remember, for those cars that run in Group GTH and Group GTA, they can pit after the 24th minute of the race. Well, we are only 20 seconds away now from getting to that 24th minute of the race. So depending on where they are on circuit, they could pit at the end of this lap. So down the Wellington Straight comes our race leader. Here is the GTH class leader, which is Sam Nesser. And yeah, he's not going to get to pit lane entry before we get to 26 minutes, which is what's remaining on the clock now. Andre Borodin on the grass to avoid contact with James Cayley, who was not going to give up. So bumbles the Greystone GT McLaren across the grass, avoids any contact. And have we got any takers for the pit lane from the Forsetti team? Well, I can't see the Aston Martins in the background of the shot there. So it does suggest we might have our first pit visitors. And yet Sam Nesser is in the pit lane. He has come in from the lead of Group GTH. And now for Richard Neary, having dealt with the Group GTH cars, it's now Group GTO cars. There's Will Orton. He's ready to jump on board the number 10 car that's being vacated by Sam. So it comes to a halt. Off come the seatbelts. Out jumps Sam after a solid stint. In jumps Will. Car's briefly put up onto its air jacks, I think, so that they could just check that everything is okay. Leona Theobald is in, so she'll be handing over to Owen Hizzy. Michael Arant is in, so he'll be handing over to Tom Holland. Whilst out on circuit, our overall race leader, Richard Neary, is still threading his way through the traffic. He's dealt with Paul Bailey. He's now dealt with the Team Trofeo Porsche of James Cayley. And now there's another car just up the road that he needs to deal with. And that will be the car of Andre Borodin. So remember, when we get to 21 minutes remaining, that is when the second pit window opens. Exactly the same time as the first one closes. 21 minutes to go. First pit window closes, second one opens. So that's the earliest at which Richard Neary can come into the pits in, what's that, 3 minutes and 15 seconds time, there or thereabouts. So for the 13th time of asking, onto the Wellington Straight. Having dealt with that batch of traffic, he's got a bit of clear tarmac for a period of time now again. So that's everybody up to and including 9th place has now been lapped, or 8th place actually has now been lapped. And at the end of this lap, I would imagine we will see the number 9 Forsetti car in. So there's the number 10 car about to vacate the pit lane. The number 11, Paddock Motorsport, just being pushed out as well. Have they blocked in the number 10? I don't think so. I think they knew they got enough in hand because it was 100 seconds in the pit lane for the number 10. It was just 80 for that one. 90 seconds for Fiona Theobald, giving way to Owen Hizzy. Lollipop Man moves out of the way as Owen Hizzy lights the rears up. And on this lap, I would imagine we've got Matthew Higgins coming in at the wheel of the number 9 car. So Jolt Racing are in as well. I could just see in the background of the shot there. So that is going to be Rupert Williams handing over to John Ingram. Meantime, Richard Neary continues on his merry way, leading by 21 seconds at the moment, which is more than good enough to see him back out in the lead of the race, or at least Ian Loggy back out in the lead of the race. So, as I suggested, into the pit lane comes the second of the 2 Forsetti Aston Martins. That's Matthew Higgins handing over to Mikey Porter. Jolt Racing going to work just to clean the windscreen on the McLaren 570S GT4. So pit stop still continuing. That's John Ingram bolted in, strapped in, door closed. Last bit of adjustment being done to the Pirelli tyres, just to adjust the pressures, take a bit of air out to get the tyre back within its prime operating window. And if you're wondering why there's a little mark around that spoke of the wheel, that's because that's where the air valve is. It allows the mechanic, rather than have to look around the whole wheel to see where the air valve is, where that tape is around the wheels, that's where the valve is. So it makes it very easy when you see the car come in. You know exactly where you need to be with the tyre pressure gauge to adjust the tyres. So 21.5 minutes to go. So the pit window about to close for any cars in Group GTH and Group GTA. Matters not, they have all pitted so far, or are in the process of just finishing off their pit stops. And in 20 seconds time, the pit window will then open for the second batch of cars, which is all of those running at the front end of the order. So in other words, if you are in the top 10 in this race, you'll be able to pit in a second, and then just outside of that top 10 will be Doc Bush. Right, that's a spin. That's Copse Corner, and that's Paul Bailey. So Paul Bailey's had a spin. I think there's an issue with the car generally, because Paul's been losing time. He is an experienced driver. He's the reigning champion, but it just has been a very un-Paul Bailey-like performance, and a spin as well is unusual. I think there are problems with that car, and I think he's trying to drive round them to bring it to the checkered flag to try and scoop up some championship points. He's running 4th in Group GTO at the moment. Now, pit window is now open for the second batch of cars. So are we going to have any takers? Yes, we do. Seamus Jennings comes in. Yes, we do. Charlotte Gilbert comes in. So this is Seamus Jennings from 6th position. Charlotte Gilbert from 7th position. The Porsche remains stationary for 75 seconds. The Lamborghini remains stationary for 100. Andrew Howard still behind the wheel of the number 97 Aston Martin, which surely will be destined for the pits as soon as possible, because you've got the pro driver Darren Turner to bolt on board that car for part 2. And for Group GTH, we've now got Tom Holland in the McLaren Artura trying to keep at arm's length Will Orton in the Forsetti Motorsport Aston Martin. So this is absolutely for position, and I think that will be for second and third in Group GTH potentially, as Will Orton tries to look up the inside. You see the car squirming around under braking as he tried to anchor the car up, couldn't work his way through, so remains where he is at the moment, which is absolutely in the Pirelli wheel tracks of Tom Holland. Into the pit lane, driver change going on. Out of the car jumps Richard Neary. Into the car goes Ian Loggy. Two very successful drivers. Of course, Richard Neary, a former champion in GT Cup with his son Sam. Sam's acting as team manager today. Ian Loggy, a former champion in British GT. And this fight's still going on between Tom Holland and Will Orton for 13th and 14th overall, second and third in Group GTH. Will Orton had one little nibble, didn't he, going down in towards Brooklands last time through, and was so hard on the brakes that the tail end of the car was squirming around on the edge of adhesion. Is he going to have another go heading up towards Stowe? He jinks out from behind, then realises that no, he's not quite going to do it. Paul Bailey into the pit lane at the wheel of the Lamborghini. Andrew Howard is in. Top Cats Racing pushing back their car in the hands of Tom Rawlings. Fraser Fennick is done with driving duties. He's in the number 3 Lamborghini pit lane and about to give way to Warren Gilbert. And then we've also got in the pit lane right at the pit lane exit end. That was Greg Caton about to jump into the GCAT Racing Porsche. So John Ingram in the older GT4 spec McLaren, the 570S, being overtaken by the Artura of Tom Holland. Tom Holland was ideally trying to get that McLaren between himself and the car that he's still under the cosh from, which is Will Orton. Will Orton's not giving up hope on trying to pick up the place. That would be second in the group. He's currently third in the group. Now this is where he had a good little nibble on the previous lap, heading up in towards Brooklands. He's having another little look this time. It wasn't successful on the previous lap. It's not going to be successful on this lap either. And now, because they are holding each other up a little bit, don't rule out the fact that the Ginetta of Owen Hizzy might come through. Now, right the way around the outside at Luffield is not sensible. You can get pushed wide on the exit, which is what I fear might happen there to Will Orton. And I fear what might happen here is that the Lamborghini of Paul Bailey's pushed back into the garage. I did say I thought there was a problem with it, and clearly that's the case. Well, Will Orton's made it stick, actually. Good stuff from him, and I would say fair driving from Tom Holland that he didn't try and force him too wide coming out of Luffield. We didn't see it, but I can only imagine that Tom was more than fair with his defence, because Will Orton still had the run on him down the National Pit Straight and has now gone through. So it is a Forsetti 1-2 again in Group GTH. Mikey Porter, the sister car, is about 7.5 seconds up the road from Will Orton's newly acquired second in Group GTH. Tom Holland third in Group GTH, and fourth in Group GTH is Owen Hizzy at the wheel of the Ginetta, who's trying to get past John Ingram's McLaren. 2 wheels on the grass on the exit of Chapel. He'll have the momentum, should go through, and ahead of the Jolt Racing car. That is not for position, that is to place a lap on it. So out of Stowe, down the Vale and in towards the braking area for Club. Now, Owen Hizzy's last lap time, as Doc Bush leaves the pit lane, Owen Hizzy's last lap time in the Ginetta, 2 minutes 13.4. Tom Holland and Will Orton ahead, 2 minutes... Sorry, Owen Hizzy's 2 minutes 2 minutes 11.4. The car's ahead, 2 minutes 12.8, 2 minutes 13.0. So Owen Hizzy in the Ginetta is catching. That's absolutely for sure. 15 minutes of the race to go. Richard Chamberlain has not as yet been into the pits. He needs to come in the next 15 seconds, otherwise the window will close. And then he would be pitting outside of the window. Where is he on circuit? Ah, right. He's just coming up to Village in the Loop, which means the pit window closes now. And if my understanding of the regulations is correct, he should have broken the beam at pit lane entry before the clock ticked to 15 minutes to go. So even if he comes in at the end of this lap, he'll be pitting outside of the window, surely. Now, that won't worry Richard. He drives for fun. He has rotten luck, but he loves the car and he loves the championship. So he will take whatever comes his way in terms of any punishment for pitting outside of the window. Is he going to come in at the end of this lap, or is he still enjoying himself too much? Because the Porsche has been a little bit recalcitrant. No, he's coming in, but he's going to break the pit lane entry beam probably about 40 seconds late, I would have thought. Here he comes in now. This will be the beam. Into the pit lane also comes Tom Holland. Now, does that mean his pitch stop was too short for the number 11 car? There's no suggestion. I don't think that it was too short. So is that a problem with this car that's brought the Paddock Motorsport McLaren Artura into the pit lane? So Richard Chamberlain in. He was in the lead of the race because he was the only one that hadn't pitted. Now, next time through, it will be Ian Logie, who has set the fastest lap of the race on the previous lap, I think. Or, sorry, will be on for the fastest lap of the race this time through, I suspect. He will pick up the lead of the race. Through goes Ian Logie. New fastest lap of the race. 2 minutes 0.062 from that car. So Ian Logie is going to lead the way. Steve Burgess in the Radical will be second. Darren Turner in the Aston Martin will be third. Fraser Fenwick having given way to Warren Gilbert now. The Top Cats Lamborghini will be next up.
Actually.
And
I just thought Leona instead. Yeah, well,
in towards the pit lane and parked up is the number 11 car of Tom Holland. I did wonder if it was a drive-through penalty, but didn't think the pit stop was too short, and indeed it is a problem with the Paddock Motorsport McLaren. So they are sadly out of the reckoning. So Tom Rawlings at the wheel of the Top Cats Racing Lamborghini will move out of the way for Ian Logie. He will not want to hold up the race leader any more than is necessary. He certainly won't want to ensure that he trips up at all, because remember, the car that's about to be lapped by the number 6 Team ABBA Racing Mercedes is the overall championship leading car. So they'll be thinking about the championship and don't want to put themselves in any position that could cause them to have a little bit of contact, get a puncture, anything like that. Just drive sensibly, think about the championship. Yep, out the throttle, let the race leader go through, go down a lap, sit on his coattails. So the race continues. We've got 12 minutes just over of the race to go. We've just had another new fastest lap of the race come in from the Aston Martin of Darren Turner, 1 minute 59.575. But let's catch up with some of the drivers down there in the pit lane who've just jumped out of the car. And one of them is the SVG Motorsport Ginetta driver, Leona Theobald.
So we're with Leona Theobald. It's been an exciting start to the race for you, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. P3 qualifying, so a good start right in the mix, but the first couple of laps was a bit mental with the different classes of cars. There was a mix of us all together. Owen picked it up in P4 and now we're currently sitting in P3, so hoping for another podium.
How has it been driving with Owen this weekend? Obviously a different co-driver with experience with Ginettas. How has it been working with him? Yeah,
it's been good. Owen's done a lot in Ginettas through all of the different classes, so it's great to work with him and learning as we go and just keep moving forward.
And some good overtaking practice in there, obviously, and a nice around the outside pass as well. I suppose it's been an exciting one, hasn't it?
Yes, it was, I believe Oren was in the car, the paddock car, so that was a good battle for a few laps, but yeah, managed to get around them, which was good. I pulled a bit of a gap, but we had a success penalty from yesterday, so it came out behind them, but yeah, currently sitting P3, so fingers crossed.
All looking good. Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, Dan Mason down there in the pit lane with Leona Theobald and Owen Hizzy in that car. The number 86 you can see on the screen is 11th overall, 3rd in Group GTH, as Leona alluded to, inheriting that 3rd as a result of the retirement for Tom Holland, but absolutely they'll take that. 1st and 2nd in Group GTH, still the pair of Forsetti Motorsport cars. Forsetti is a team based on the doorstep of Snetterton in Norfolk, where we conclude our 2024 championship season. Remember me saying Darren Turner had done the fastest lap of the race? Well, he's just bettered it. 1 minute 59.113 from him that time through. So that lap time that he did was 4 seconds quicker than Steve Burgess. So that Aston Martin, the number 97 car, is catching the Radical, and such is the rate of close. A couple of laps time, he'll be there and could be up into 2nd place. So we'll keep an eye on that one. So Owen Hezzy turning his way through Copse Corner. Ian Logie still continuing to lead by a pretty dominant, almost 45 seconds now, the Team ABBA car. Well, here's Steve Burgess. He's just threaded his way to put a lap on Doc Bush. But behind Doc Bush should be the ever-closing Aston Martin of Darren Turner. So here in towards the loop. There is Darren Turner. He sneaks up the inside of Doc Bush. That was a decisive move. Doc saw him coming, got out of the way. And now Darren Turner will fully turn his attentions to catching Steve Burgess. Steve's last lap, 1 minute 3.6. Darren's the fastest of the race, 1:59.1. So over the course of this lap, he's already taken the best part of 2.5 seconds out of it. Make that 3 and a bit seconds out of it. So it's going to be down to probably hovering around 2 seconds by the end of this lap. So Steve Burgess still running second in the race for the moment. Might drop to third. It wouldn't affect his group position. He'd still be second in Group GTO because Darren Turner's is a Group GT3 car. But he's certainly on a charge. So down towards Copse they'll go. The gap is down to 9/10 of a second. That's all. So it's a 2:04 from Steve. It was a 1 minute 59 from Darren. So the fight for second and third is absolutely on. And I'm not sure how much defence Steve Burgess can put up or would want to put up because, as we say, it's a car that's in a different group. He doesn't need to worry about it for championship scoring purposes. They've already gone through. Here's Doc Bush. And are we going to have the change for second? The long shot from Stowe Corner would allow us to pick up on that and see whether Darren Turner is going to make it through. Mikey Porter still continues to lead Group GTH. He sits there in 9th place overall at the wheel of car number 9. He's about to be lapped by Richard Chamberlain's Porsche that's still running well. Don't want to put the commentator's curse on it. It's running. It's brilliant to see. Richard Chamberlain will have a big smile on his face because he's on for potentially 4th at the moment, but he'll need to watch his mirrors. Greg Caton at the wheel of the GCAT Racing Porsche, there he goes, isn't that far away. So we'll keep an eye on that one. In fact, Richard Chamberlain is only on an out lap at the moment, so I think he might have come back in for a stop-go penalty, a result of pitting outside of the window because he was late, wasn't he? Let's be honest. So yeah, it was another pit stop for him. He spent another 21 seconds in the pits, which is pretty much a drive-through for pitting outside of the window is the penalty. And now that he has managed to work his way through and past the number 9 car, which is in the hands of Mikey Porter, I think we can go back down to the pit lane, and this time we're going to catch up with one of the drivers for Top Caps Racing. He's out of the number 3 Lamborghini. It's Fraser Fennick.
So Fraser, good start to the race. How has it been for you?
Yeah, it's a brilliant start. I couldn't have asked for any more. You know, we've had a great start to the season anyway, as it is. I only came in halfway through, but I'm really enjoying it, and we keep improving session by session, race by race, and I can't ask for any more.
I suppose the other car is fighting for the overall title as well, but has it made any difference to the way you've both raced? Because you've both enjoyed on-track battles all season.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're all here for the same lap. If there's times I can help the other car, then yeah, I definitely will. But if not, then I'm racing my own race. But no, we're all enjoying it, and we're all here for a laugh.
And you feel improvements every lap that you get in the car?
Yeah, definitely. You know, we're improving every single time I go out in it, so I can't ask for any more, really. It's just exactly what I wanted.
All going to plan. Thank you, Fraser.
No worries, thank you.
Good to hear from Fraser Fennick there, and as we say, he joined the championship at Snetterton for the first time, so he wasn't at Donington or Brands Hatch, but has really made an impression on track since then. We have had that change for second and third place. I said it was pretty much inevitable. Darren Turner has gone through now up into second place. Steve Burgess in the Radical has dropped to third position. Richard Chamberlain is there in 4th, Greg Caton is 5th, and this car is now 6th, which is Warren Gilbert, who has taken over the car from Fraser Fennick. So this is the car that currently leads Group GTC. Top Cats Racing have been very successful in Group GTC with their 2 Lamborghinis that they've run for the last few seasons. They started with 1, and then Charlotte Gilbert was provided hers by husband Warren as a birthday present. And that allowed her to move away from the very long in the tooth Marcus Mantis, which has still a fantastic car to see out there. It's such a shame that, you know, as the championship moves on and as time moves on, that The Marcos Mantis is now probably better suited to more historic GT races, and it would be something that caters for far more modern cars like GT Cup. But Top Cats Racing have been very successful since they brought these Super Trofeo spec cars into the championship season or so ago. Darren Turner, another new fastest lap of the race last time through. 1 minute 59.105 now from Darren Turner. Now remember, that at the moment will give not the car pole position, because it's the fastest lap times that are set in the first half of this race that give that. So in other words, we discount the lap times from the pro sporting drivers and the pros who get in for the second part of the race. So fastest lap time is not going to net them pole, I don't think. I think that's still going to go the way of the number 6 Mercedes for the sprint race later on. Greg Caton has also managed to find his way through and ahead of Richard Chamberlain on this lap, so that is a change for position. Greg Caton in the GCAT Racing Porsche 911 GTR GT3 goes up to 4th, and the 935 of Richard Chamberlain drops down into 5th position. But again, that's a GT3 car going ahead of a GTO car, so again, doesn't affect the championship point scoring for either one of those. It's just overall positions that change, as we've now got a little more than 3.5 minutes remaining of this race. So through Maggots and Beckett's, out of Chapel Curve and onto the Hanger Straight go Greg Caton and Richard Chamberlain. Now for Richard Chamberlain, he's fairly safe in that 5th place because the next car is quite a chunk behind. It's going to be Warren Gilbert, who's about 25 seconds behind. For Greg Caton, having gained a further place, he is pretty secure now in 4th, because 50 seconds up the road is Steve Burgess, so I think that's finally allowing things to settle down. So the only battle that might be worth keeping half an eye on is maybe the battle for the lead of Group GTH. Mikey Porter was 0.4 of a second slower than the sister car from Fossetti last time through, Will Autumn, but he is 5.5 seconds adrift, so that might just be Mikey Porter just pacing himself to the end of the race and not particularly worrying about what's going on. One person who won't be worried about what's going on, that's going to be Ian Loggy, because it looks as though himself, Richard Neary, Team ABBA are on for yet another win. So they took a win in one of the races at Donington Park. They took a win in both of the pit stop races at Brands Hatch. They won all 4 races at Snetterton. They won one of the races at Alton Park, and they have won 2 races this weekend. So they are on 10 overall wins so far in the 2024 GT Cup Championship, and heading up towards the left-hander at Brooklands for what will be the penultimate time, because there's going to be less than a lap time left on the clock when they head over the start-finish line this time through. So they've had 6 wins on the bounce so far this year at one point, because they won the final race at Brands Hatch, all 4 at Snetterton, the first race at Alton Park, so 6 on the trot at one point. Well, they're potentially going to make it a hat-trick for this weekend if they stay where they are. Another new fastest lap of the race last time through for Darren Turner. He's pushing hard, he's not leaving a lot on the table in the Beech Dean Aston. 1 minute 59.009. So if that was a 1 minute 59.007, that would be a very Aston Martin sort of number, wouldn't it? But a 009 from Darren Turner. Richard Chamberlain looks on and still looking as though he has put a shift in that race. Big smile from him, and you could see the second choice team manager Sam Neary there in the background. So for Ian Loggy, more traffic having been dealt with, he's worked his way through and past Mikey Porter's Group GTH leading Aston Martin Vantage GT4, and now only just safely needs to negotiate the final half a lap in reality. The international pit straight, past the wing, or the Grand Prix start if you wish to call it, up towards the sweep at Abbey, and then he'll flick left at Farm and then into the heavy braking area for the slow corners at Village. The right-hander straight from the left-hand side of the circuit back over to the right to take in the loop, and then late turn into the loop, so you can straighten up the exit, get on the throttle and carry all of that momentum through the King at Aintree, down the Wellington Straight and then it's just Brooklands, Luffield, and the pretty much flat out, untroubled corner at Woodcut to deal with. It's a corner you almost don't need to really think about Woodcut because it's flat. So up towards Brooklands, through the right-hander at Luffield, and then it's just Woodcut corner to deal with. And as he comes out of Luffield up towards Woodcut corner, it's going to be a hat-trick here this weekend at Silverstone for Team ABBA Racing, for Richard Neary and for Ian Loggy and all the rest of the crew as well. They'll be as pleased as punch with that one. They come through to claim another win, unbeaten as yet this weekend. Wait for the arrival of Darren Turner over the start-finish line. In the meantime, through has gone Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings, who have picked up the win in Group GTC. I did wonder as to whether Warren Gilbert might engineer a change around of the position of those cars. And yes, Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings in the number 2 car claimed the win. Through goes Darren Turner, so Andrew Howard and Darren Turner sets the fastest lap on the final lap again as well. So it really was a good stint from the Aston Martin factory driver. 1 minute 58.975 on the final lap. So that gives them the fastest lap of the race. Say, because it was set in the second part of the race, it won't necessarily give them pole position. I think it will still be the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes that will be on pole. And then there's a few more cars to come over the start-finish line, including the third place car overall. Steve Burgess has not come through as yet, so just wait the arrival of his car. He should be, I suspect, the next car over the start-finish line at the rear of the Radical RXC. And we also need to rush over the start-finish line Greg Caton and Richard Chamberlain as well in their respective Porsches, the 911 GT3 car and the 935. So Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings will be very pleased indeed that it's another group win for them. I suspect Top Cats Racing with Hex.com just ensured that they kept the car of the 2 they've got in their stable, the one that's right at the sharp end of the championship where it needed to be. It's another win in Group GTH for Matthew Higgins and Mikey Porter, which will please them. They lost a bit of ground in the championship as a result of missing the Alton Park races, and there are no drop scores in GT Cup, so they will still be, I think, 3rd overall in the championship. So we'll do the totting up and the maths after the end of the weekend, because of course we've still got another sprint race to come up. So all of the cars are through, everybody has taken the checkered flag, and shortly we'll be able to confirm the results for you for round 17 of the 2024 GT Cup Championship. It's another win for ABBA Commercials. Could they do at Silverstone what they did at Snetterton and claim all 4 wins over the course of the weekend? We'll find out when we see the final race later on today, and that's going to be at around about 4:35 p.m. But let's confirm the results for round 17. It's a win for Richard Neary and Ian Loggy by 30 seconds in the end from Andrew Howard and the charging Darren Turner, who set the fastest lap of the race on the final lap. They win Group GT3. Steve Burgess was 3rd, Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton were 4th, and Richard Chamberlain saw the checkered flag after a difficult day yesterday. He finished in 5th place. Group GTC honours went to Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings, who were there in 6th place, with the sister car from Warren Gilbert and Fraser Fenwick finishing 7th. Andre Borodin and Ed Peed were there in 8th place, and in 9th place it was car number 9, but more importantly it's the win in Group GTH for Matthew Higgins and Mikey Porter over the sister car that finished in 10th place, Sam Nezza and Will Orton, so they were 2nd in Group GTH. And Leona Theobald and Owen Hizzy finished 11th. They'll complete the Group GTH podium. James and Bill Cayley were there in 12th, ahead of Doc Bush, who was 13th, and it was Rupert Williams and John Ingram that finished in 14th place. Problems for Michael Arant and Tom Holland, and also Paul Bailey with David Brabham. Chris Murphy retired. Jazz Sapra retired because he's focusing on getting a lap time in purely for the sprint race later on. And that's what happened to Kev Clark as well. Retired out on track, but we'll see him in the sprint race later. We'll also hopefully catch you for the sprint race later on. Round 18 of the championship coming up, and we are scheduled to see the green flag for that one around about 4:30 this afternoon. So thanks for joining us for round 17 and the pit stop race. We'll catch you for the sprint race later on. Goodbye.